Hey everyone, it's Sean, the What's Up Dude. We are here at the Downers Grove, Illinois Museum. We're going to check out information about this beautiful town's history and see what's inside the museum and have a little fun along the way. This is Sean, the What's Up Dude. Welcome to the Downers Grove Park District Museum campus. Downers Grove, an overview of the history. Downers Grove began as a farming community in the 1830s. Downers Grove settlers enjoyed peaceful relationships with the local Potawatomi tribe, even though the Black Hawk War was occurring in 1832. During this time, Maple Avenue was the village main street. During the 1860s, with the establishment of the CB&Q Railroad, now known as the Burlington Northern and Santa Fe Line, the community expanded and Main Street became Downers Grove's business district. The community's population grew from approximately 350 in 1870 to 2,500 in 1890. Life was still primarily rural in the 1890s. Service such as electricity, plumbing, natural gas for heating, and telephone services did not arrive until the turn of the century. Over the last century, Downers Grove has grown from its rural roots to a modern suburb. Today, the Downers Grove Park District Museum provides leisure and educational experiences for the community through collecting, preserving, exhibiting, and interpreting materials that explain and document the history of Downers Grove and its relationship to the local, state, regional, and national history. We are now walking through the garden. See what they have back here before we go into the museum. Nice little bench here you can sit on. And here is the Heritage Garden. Although the Blodgetts were not primarily farmers, they would have grown a portion of their food. The Blodgetts planted, harvested, and stored a variety of fruits, vegetables, and herbs for cooking, treating illnesses and trading with their neighbors. Kitchen gardening was common in homes throughout the 1800s and were brought back into the form of Victory Garden during World War II. The museum's Heritage Garden features heirloom varieties of plants available in the Downers Grove area from the mid-19th to mid-20th century. Heirloom refers to plants that have a long history of being farmed in the area and developed but have not been changed through science. Heirloom produce often has a great taste but are less hardy than the produce grown for today's industrial agriculture system. The museum's garden aims to preserve the history and diversity of the plants and demonstrates pre-industrial agriculture techniques. Charles Blodgett, the youngest son of Israel and Avis Blodgett, was a businessman involved with real estate farming and politics. He served as village trustee for 18 years, school board member for 25 years, and DuPage County supervisor for 35 years. One of his biggest accomplishments as county supervisor was the construction of the county courthouse in Wheaton in 1897. Charles lived in the 1892 house until his death in 1921 at the age of 81. He is buried in Downers Grove Oak Crest Cemetery. Charles' children continued to live in the house until the 1930s. It remained a private residence until the Downers Grove Park District purchased it in 1976 and opened the Park District Museum the following year. And this is a picture of Charles and his wife, Emma. In 1982, Charles Blodgett, the youngest son of Israel and Avis Blodgett, moved his parents' home to the rear of his property and built a modern home for his family. This house was typically of other houses built during the Victorian era, featuring a steep pitched roof, clapboard overlapping siding, decorative moldings, and spineless, and a porch that spans the front of the house. Charles' house shows his family's wealth. It was large compared to many of the homes in the area, and several of the house's bedrooms contain closets, a rare feature at that time. Although modern by Victorian-era standards, it did not have indoor plumbing, electricity, or a telephone service. The amenities did not arrive in the area until a few years later. This house now serves as the Downers Grove Museum, which provides for the care and the interpretation of artifacts and archives related to the history of Downers Grove. Originally from Massachusetts, Israel, Blodgett came to Illinois in 1832, settling near Naperville the same year that Pierce Downers settled in what is now Downers Grove. Israel then sent for his wife Avis and their children. The family soon moved to the Downers Grove area, purchasing 300 acres of land from Asa Wells, where Israel established his blacksmith shop. The Blodgetts first lived in a one-room log cabin, which was built in this area, what is now the museum campus. A structure was later added to the cabin and was used as early as the schoolhouse for the Blodgett's daughter Mary as a teacher. The illustration to the right gives you an idea of the typical size of the log cabin of the mid-1800s. Israel Avis and their eight grandchildren lived in a cabin in this size until constructing a larger frame house, which is located to your right, in 1846. The drawing room was a partly shared room where men, women, and children gathered, but it was mostly the men of the house's space. Unless there was a party going on, women and children would not normally be permitted in this room. It was an attractive room and was generally decorated with darker hues, illuminating masculinity. There were small touches of femininity, including floral arrangements, oriental vases, and women's parlor chairs, which did not have chair arms due to the fullness of ladies' Victorian dresses. The drawing room has many expensive decorative pieces because the family would use them as talking pieces to entertain their guests. These pieces allowed families to show us off their travels, to display their taste in decor, and to illuminate their social status. Other furnishings that would be placed in the drawing room included a brilliant chandelier in the middle of the room, a piano or organ, a writing table or desk, and a large window with potted plants nearby. The drawing room was also a place where the family could, if permitted by the father, gather for leisure activities. Families would play checkers or chess, play card games, play music, or read novels. In modern-day America, this room would be considered the family room, different as it may have been. Sitting room. The room located behind the drawing room was called the sitting room. This room was considered to be the feminine domain. Men were generally disallowed from this place unless they were a servant. This type of room was broadly decorated with lace, floral prints, and arrangements, and ornate frames. This space did not have a darker scheme like the drawing room. This was a woman's space, and a lighter color reflected this. The sitting room was a place where Victorian ladies could gather to escape from their undelegated domestic duties and have afternoon tea, sew, paint, read poetry or novels, and keep up with correspondences. Victorian women would also use this room to meet with the family servants to plan activities for the day. Some of the furnishings that would be placed in this room included a parlor set with floral or fruit engravings, shelving with porcelain, glass, or pottery, oil lamp showing the delicacy and charm of a Victorian lady, a chandelier and a desk for writing to keep old letters from previous suitors secure. This room here is the dining room, and they would plan family meals and dining events. And they would set the table. If it was an upper class family, they would set the table in this manner to show that they had elegant class. And they would all join together as the servants would bring them food and serve them. Victorian period, laundry was one of the households. Columnists stated the great domestic dread. Victorians would have to dedicate one whole day, usually Monday, to the chore of washing their clothes. They soaked their clothes overnight and in the morning scrubbed the garments on a washboard with bar soap, boiled and stirred them in hot water, and finally rinsed, wrung, and hung them out to dry. Whitening or starching clothes required additional boiling, stirring, and rinsing. When clothes were dried, the Victorians put them aside for ironing the next day. They heated several irons on the stove at one time, and as one iron cooled down, they removed the handle and put it on a hot iron. However, they struggled to accurately regulate how hot the irons became and often scorched or burned their clothes. This room right here, although it is modern, the things inside of it are historical and tell you history of everything that happened in this area. This right here, this is the children's bedroom of what it would look like back in the 1800s. Very similar to some of the bedrooms we would have today, some of the old rustic furniture. Some people still have that. Old dresser here and an old bed. But some people still have these kind of designs. If you notice, the ceilings are a little high. That way airflow is better, because in this time they didn't actually have air conditioning and they relied on natural cooling. This room showcases blacksmith history, tools, and other things they would use during those times. of history with different historical figures that I would take photos of and send you to person. In 1846, when James K. Polk was President of the United States, the Blodgett family built a house to replace their log cabin. Common features of this Greek Revival architectural style include a gable roof, wide trim, large window and doors, and a front door surrounded by windows panels. The house was built of post and beam construction methods different from building the log cabin in an 1892 Victorian home located on your left. Wood was cut from the surrounding property and logs were hand-hewn using various types of axes. Hand-hewn is the act of cutting or shaping logs with hard hits using handheld, non-electrical tools such as axes or chisels. These logs were assembled using mortise and tenon joinery. Each piece was fitted together and secured with pins. One of the unique aspects of this type of construction is that it did not need nails. Originally, this house was located where the 1892 Blodgett family sits today. In the 1890s, it was moved to the rear of the Blodgett property to make room for the construction of a new home. In 2008, through a community-wide effort, the house was returned to the museum campus and restored to its original appearance. Avis Blodgett, sitting with her 6 surviving sons, 5 of whom are shown in here, in front of the 1846 house in its original location on Maple Avenue, very likely on her 80th birthday in 1876. The family photograph provided courtesy of Peter Burley. And this is Israel Blodgett's house from 1846, and it is part of the National Underground Railroad network to freedom. So this is the house here. The Underground Railroad was not the railroad that exists today in Downers Grove. Instead, it was an informal and secret network of meeting points, transportation routes, and safe houses coordinated by a group of people called abolitionists who were against slavery and helped slaves escape to free states and Canada. It was in existence throughout the early 1800s, but reached its peak in the 1840s and 1850s. The state of Illinois was considered a free state, and Chicago was a major gateway to freedom in the north. However, slavery was still practiced in the southern part of the state. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 required people to help with the capture and return of runaway slaves, making the act of hiding and helping slaves in the Underground Railroad illegal and dangerous. Abolitionists could be heavily fined and given jail time if they found hiding runaway slaves. They were careful to keep their involvement secret, thus it is often difficult to know the people and places within the Underground Railroad. The Blodgetts were reportedly active in the Underground Railroad in their native Massachusetts and continued their activities when they moved to Illinois. Runaway slaves are likely to have hidden in the 1846 house or on the surrounding Blodgett property and outbuildings. Israel and Avis Blodgett moved to Downers Grove in 1836. Israel Porter Blodgett Sr. operated a blacksmith shop and is credited with developing the self-scouring plow used to turn the Illinois prairie. Israel and Avis Blodgett were against slavery and believed to have been actively involved in the Underground Railroad by using their home as a place to hide slaves. Still, they lived a typical pioneer life. They had 8 children, with 6 living adults to adulthood. Several of their sons became noted Civil War veterans, and all succeeded in business or politic careers. Israel and Avis remained in the 1846 house until their deaths. Israel died in 1861, the year that the Civil War began, and Abraham Lincoln took the presidential office, while Avis lived until 1882. Both are buried in Downers Grove Main Street Cemetery. This is the entrance to the Israel Blodgett house, built in 1846. This home of Israel and Avis Blodgett is believed to have been an active stop on the Underground Railroad, with the Israel and as the conductor. Having settled in Downers Grove in 1836, the family was very active in the abolitionist movement and advocated for freedom of enslaved peoples. Marker placed by Illinois State Daughters of American Colonists on March 25th of 2023. History of the house. 1846, originally built in 1846, the Greek Revival style architecture home was the second home built in Downers Grove by Israel and Avis Blodgett. The first was a log cabin style home built in 1835 and torn down before 1878. After Israel's death in 1861, the house passed into the hands of his youngest son, Charles Avis Blodgett. Continued to live in the house until her death in 1882.
He asked Mother if she would give him a drink of water. She took a thin pail and cup and went to the spring, which was not more than 5 or 6 rods from the house, filled the pail from the spring, which was full of fresh, clear water, and began giving the neighbor a drink. The fellow cursed her and asked her why in the devil she was giving water to the negroes. Said that he asked for water for himself, not them. She answered that the spring was there, he could help himself, that these men couldn't do that, and, therefore, she was giving them the water and not him. This was the first opportunity I had ever had to see a sample of our Southern slavery, and it was a lesson which has stayed with me through my life, as it has with all the other members of our family.
And there are 4 buttons here that you can press. Some of them are longer than others. You can come in here and press them and get a brief history of each individual thing, including the Underground Railroad, abolitionist information, and also a look and find scavenger hunt, and about the relocation of the 1846 Blodgett home in 2008. In the downstairs, there is a complete history and timeline of all of the things that happened in Downers Grove. Look up. Originally, to the house, these beams have miraculously survived 2 location moves and allow insight into both building materials and building techniques of the time period. These beams are made from a local variety of maple trees whose bark is still intact today, which is impressive because these trees were once underground. The joints that the beams form are an excellent example of mortise and tenon construction. Please like, share, and subscribe so that I can explore new areas and go to more places.